Good evening, everyone. My name is Abhishek Jain, and I'm pleased to invite you all to the Fellowship series by Planty. Today, we will be covering a Judicial Fellowship at the International Court of Justice, or the ICJ. Towards the end of this session, we will also be having a Q&A session, for which I would request you all to put your questions in the live chat box. We're very fortunate to have with us Kritika Sharma, a 2016 graduate of Amity Law School, after which she went on to complete her LLM in Advanced Studies in Public International Law from Leiden University in 2017. She has been a Leiden University in 2017. She has been a Judicial Fellow at the International Court of Justice from 2017 to 2018 and is currently a PhD student at Leiden University and also a Research Fellow at the Max Planck Institute at Luxembourg for Procedural Law. In tonight's session, Kritika will be speaking in detail on the application process to the fellowship, as well as the opportunities that open up upon completion of this fellowship. I would now like to hand it over to Kritika to begin this session.
Yes, thank you so much for that very kind introduction, and also for inviting me today to talk about the fellowship program at the ICJ. So this session, of course, is going to look at the Judicial Fellowship Program at the International Court of Justice at the ICJ, and I intend to deal with all of the specifics to do with the application process, how to apply, when, maybe also why. But before I do that, I thought it might be interesting and perhaps more useful to get a little bit of an idea of what my route was to the fellowship program as well as after. So what I intend to do really is to start off with a brief summary of my journey to the fellowship and also a little bit of what I did after, so that it kind of paints a bit of a picture as to what options really are available to you in terms of when to apply for this, how to apply for it, as well as options that are available to you afterwards. So to sort of shape it through the view of my experience, really. So starting with that, I did my LLB between 2011 to 2016, as you mentioned, at Amity University in Noida. In 2013, roughly speaking, I was introduced to international criminal law through a moot court, so the On Did You Know, which is organized by the Red Cross. And this introduced me to sort of the world of public international law a little bit backwards, because I started with an introduction to international criminal law specifically, but it really sparked my interest in the subject. And so after that experience, I sort of looked into it more as a potential specialization. I got interested in public international law in general. And what I did was that a year later, I went for a summer school in The Hague at the Asse Institute. So the course was on international criminal law as a specialization, as well as legal approaches to counterterrorism. So I had sort of that little stint where it really developed my thinking further into international criminal law, public international law as a result. And I decided to ask for to be able to do my dissertation for my bachelor's itself in international criminal law and public international law, because I did my dissertation on the role of states in prosecuting international crime. So when I did this in my final year, I also decided to apply for, and I ended up doing an internship at the Coalition for the International Criminal Court. So I did this, I interned at their New York office, which is what they call their UN liaison office. And as a result, what I did was I carried out various research-related tasks, and I helped monitor the progress of certain cases at the ICC, at the International Criminal Court, as well as sort of helped monitor developments in international justice in general by sitting in at the Security Council in the General Assembly and monitoring these debates. So this is an internship I did while I was still in my 5th year. After I completed this internship, I was again quite sure of that this was the path I wanted to go down. I was interested in international law, and I decided to apply for my LLM. I decided to apply for the Advanced Masters in Public International Law at Leiden University. I got accepted for this, and in the run-up to before I started my LLM, I ended up then doing, in 2016, then doing an internship for 2 months at the Office of the Registrar at the International Court of Justice. So you see, already through this experience, I had a little bit of a sort of insight into how the court worked, and it sort of sparked my interest even further, and I knew that this was really an institution that I wanted to work in further, and a sort of an area I wanted to explore. So this is what I did before I had, just before I started my LLM at Leiden University. Through my internship here, I did discover about the Judicial Fellowship Programme. It was called the University Traineeship Programme at that point. And it just so happened, and at this point, just to sort of clarify, I knew I was going to start at Leiden soon, in a month. And I just discovered that Leiden University had nominated their first Judicial Fellow for this program that year, and I had the opportunity to talk with her and sort of really talk to people about it in general. And I knew, of course, that this was therefore an opportunity that was available. It was a possibility. So when I started the LLM, I talked to as many people as I could, and I had it in my mind that if possible, this is really something I would want to do, and definitely something I would apply for. And so accordingly, throughout the course of my LLM, I had this in mind, and I tried to work towards it based on the advice that I received. So the LLM started in about, I'd like to say August or September 2016. And by December, I think, or maybe early January, we received a call for applications from the university informing us about the fellowship program and asking for applications. Now, I'm going to talk about this in more detail soon, but just to already sort of clarify, for this fellowship, you have to be nominated from your university. So you have to first get selected by the university, and so it's through the university that you that the whole process starts. So my university reached out to us, asked for applications for this. I sent in my CV, a letter of interest. And then I'd like to say by the first week of February, perhaps, I received an invitation for an interview within the university, of course. They interviewed 6 of us, and then they ended up nominating 3 of us for the program. And then about by April that year, I received information that I had been selected for the program from the court, and I started it in September. So the program, of course, it runs from September to June or July. It depends on the workload of the court and the needs of the judge you're working with, because through the fellowship program, of course, you work with one of the 15 judges of the ICJ. And so it depends on that, but generally between September to June or July. Already during the fellowship program, I had developed quite a clear idea that I had wanted to do my PhD soon after, or if not, around then itself. And I had the opportunity to begin my PhD through what they call the external track at my university, at Leiden University. And I started doing my PhD already towards while I was working to this track by the end of my fellowship. So right after the fellowship, I also worked for around 5 months in a defense team at the International Criminal Court instead. And then I started working as a research fellow here at the Max Planck Institute in Luxembourg for procedural law, where I am I'm working here as a research fellow while also doing my PhD. So that's my story, both to the fellowship and what I've done after. Now moving to more specific aspects of the application process. Already, like I mentioned, so this is the fellowship is an opportunity to work for around a year almost. So it's around 10, 11 months, depending on the June and July issue, and with a judge of the International Court of Justice. So you're already, I think, before I get into the nitty-gritty of it, you know that this is an opportunity that it's amongst the best you can get, and as far as opportunities go, you can really make the best out of it. So now, how to go about the application process? So first of all, I'd like to talk about who should apply. Broadly speaking, if you have an interest in public international law, if you intend to pursue a career in the field, whether it's in practice, so if you want to work at an international court or tribunal, or whether it's in academia, of course, I would encourage applying for it. I did the program right after I had done my LLM, and I found that very useful because you can really put into practice sort of issues and topics you've been debating and analyzing and studying, and you have the opportunity to witness them in where it all takes place, really. So if you have an interest in public international law, I would suggest this is a good way to sort of kickstart, maybe I could say, your career in this field, and it's a good stepping stone, and really I think helps you develop and hone the skills and knowledge that you would need to continue in a career in this area, and it's really a good experience for that. When should you apply for this? So to a large extent, this would also depend on your university, of course, because I'm sure different universities would have different timelines or deadlines that they would like to follow internally. I know from the court, for example, it's usually in February that they sort of have a cutoff. It's towards the starting of February. I think this year it was the 14th of February. Also in 2017, when I applied, it was around then. I remember the internal process. They selected the three of us by around the 10th of February, and we had to submit all of our documentation by around the 13th, so that it was ready to be submitted before the deadline. So I would assume that it works in a similar fashion in other universities as well. But so you should keep an eye out for it around at this period. But all of the information is now available on the court website, so keep an eye out on that. It's a good thing to sort of just make sure that there are no changes, and to stay up to date on that information, definitely. So that's the period that you should keep an eye out for. Again, in the category of when to apply, I'd like to emphasize, for me, I genuinely found it very helpful that I was in the earlier stages of my career in public international law when I did this. Of course, I had done my advanced public international law, my LLM in advanced public international law, and I'd also interned in the field. So I think with a combination of that, it was really the perfect timing, because I had a little bit of, I had, I think, a good sort of amount of experience within the field by then, or at least I had studied it in great detail by then. But at the same time, I wasn't very far ahead in my career. I was still in the early stages, so I found it the most helpful. And I found it to be a really fruitful experience based on really the timing of it all for me, as well as, for example, my own research project. I felt that it helped me develop it because it was really at the right time. All of it sort of came together. So I would sort of keep in mind that also, if you go into like the description of the fellowship, it is for earlier stages relatively, so to sort of specialize further in the field. How to apply? So there are two stages in this. The first is, of course, at the university level, which is, of course, key because it's the university that has to nominate you. And then it's at the court stage. So going already to the university, they have to nominate individuals, and then your application is sent by the university along with sort of a covering letter by the university with your transcripts and everything to the court. And then it's the 15 judges who decide. So each judge chooses one judicial fellow who would work with them. And so that's the sort of two-stage process. My experience with the application process, it might be easier to sort of explain this using my own experience as an example. My university asked for my CV, a covering letter, as well as a language proficiency. So they asked me to tell them what my proficiency in French was, for example, because my master's was in English. The court, of course, is bilingual. It works in English and French. My language proficiency at that point, I was B1 in French. So working proficiency, or well, I think B2 would be ideal, but I was in between B1 and B2 when I applied. So I told this to my university while I was applying for the fellowship. And then right after that, the university had its own interview process. Now the interview was divided into sort of different categories. They asked me why I wanted to do it, why I would make a good candidate for it. It was very varied, the questions. A lot of it was substantive as well. It was about international law. We had a discussion about jus cogens and the ICJ on jus cogens, and my sort of landmark case from my point of view at the ICJ. So some of it was quite substantive, and then some of it was also sort of to do with what would you do in certain situations when faced with certain problems in the law and things like that. So it was very varied. And then there was also a part that was in French, because like I mentioned, the LLM was in English, and the interview was also conducted in English, so a section of it was then conducted in French because of those requirements. So that was from the university. They had shortlisted 6. This is, of course, specific to my university, but this was my experience with it. They had shortlisted 6 candidates, and after the interview, they nominated 3. So they sent 3 of our applications to the court, and then the court process, what you have to do is you have to send in your CV again, your letter of motivation. I sent 2 reference letters. I also listed 3 referees. Just to sort of give you an example, I mentioned one of my professors, one previous employer from CICC, for example, and another from a previous clerkship I had done. I also sent in a form that you have to fill in from the court itself, which is quite a detailed form about basically your employment history or education. It's similar to an employment form that you would submit for the UN, for example. It's quite similar to that, unless they've changed that. But this detailed form that you have to fill in, and what I also sent in was, which they ask for, is a writing sample. Now you can send up to 15 pages, and this was quite a conundrum because it's quite a, it's not a lot. 15 pages is not a full article yet, but it's also longer than a very short comment. So I decided to send in a piece I had written that was 6 pages, but it was on public international law and part of my sort of core work. And so basically for this, I would strongly recommend, if you send a shorter piece, something you're confident about, I think that should also be good, because I think it's more important to send your best work and something that's relevant to prove and to show your interest in the subject and your sort of grasp over it. So this is what I sent in for my application for the court. That being said, after that, of course, like I mentioned, the court, they decide on who is selected. Soon after, therefore, then I started my fellowship. About the fellowship itself. So moving now to a little bit about my insights about the fellowship program. Like I mentioned earlier, I think it's really a wonderful opportunity to be able to, first of all, it's the opportunity to work for a year at the International Court of Justice. So if public international law is your chosen field, this is sort of the best stepping stone for that, and it's really an invaluable opportunity as far as that's concerned, because you get to really work on the cases before the court. You get to really sort of live through that that experience within the field. So you get to work, like I mentioned, directly with one of the 15 judges of the court. You work alongside also with the legal officer of the judge, and you work on the cases that are, this is generally the case, you work on the cases that are before the court. Of course, it could vary depending on which judge you work with. The workload might be a little bit different, but at the same time, it's you work on cases that are pending before the court. So it's quite straightforward as far as that's concerned. You work within the field that you've sort of been analyzing and writing about for so long, so you can put sort of your knowledge to practice there, and sort of get to view it from a practical point of view. So it's really a good training process as well. And other than that, it's also to describe it, it's very similar to a clerkship in general. It's just that's what it is. It's a clerkship at the court. You can also, one thing I'd like to point out as well is that I think it also allows you to really develop your academic thought process as well. So apart from just being sort of within the practical part of the field, I think it really, given, I mean, you have all these stalwarts and the judges there, I really think it allows you, the atmosphere really allows you to develop your academic thought process as well. So again, using my own example, for example, I worked on my research proposal for my PhD during the same time period, and I felt like it really helped me sort of explore the areas that I wanted to develop further in my own project, and it helped me sort of develop my own academic thinking a little bit more. So I think it's good for that as well, because you really it allows you to hone that part as well. For me as well, I'd like to point out, I found it very helpful and fascinating that you get to see how the court works institutionally. So, for example, my research project looks at the institutional functioning of a different court, but a court, an international court, and I really feel that seeing how the court worked day to day really helped me in that. Because you see how different parts of the court interact with each other. Of course, you're working with the judges, but you also see, for example, how the court, different parts of the court interact with each other, like with the registry as well as chambers, and so you really see that institutional part, that practical bit, which I think is really helpful to understand how all of these issues have practical effects and how it really happens in practice. I think that's quite important as well. And it's informed a lot of the ways that I think of courts in general as well, and has helped inform my research. So I think that's that's really helpful. Other than that, I'd like to point out, as far as skills and opportunities, really, I think that it's also important to point out here that since the fellowship is based at the ICJ, it's in the Peace Palace, you also have the Permanent Court of Arbitration there. So it really gives you the opportunity to also interact with other institutions. So you have members of the PCA. So it's very good as far as networking opportunities are concerned as well. And you can attend a lot of events there. But also, not only is it good for networking in terms of being within the Peace Palace itself, where you have other institutions, as well as access to the Peace Palace library, which is important, but also you're based in The Hague. And I think for someone who is specializing in public international law, that's also really ideal, because you have all these other courts and tribunals and institutions based in The Hague, and all of these sort of uh, people who are really stalwarts in the field and are living the field really. You have lots of opportunities to interact with them, and also lots of events that help sort of further stimulate your interest in this and develop your ideas and your ability to practice in the field further. So it's really a good platform for exploring a career in this field, if that's what you're looking for. So other than that, again, talking about skills that you pick up through this, and opportunities that you leave with, skills and opportunities that you leave with after the fellowship. For this, I'd like to point out a little bit about the work that you'll be doing as a judicial fellow. So, like I mentioned, you work on cases. This means, you look at the docket of the court, and you know already that this is sort of the perfect mixture of substantive law as well as procedural law. You have cases in different stages, so different stages procedurally as well. So the demands as well are different, and it's a varying field of subjects and sort of sub-subjects and topics and issues. So it's really quite wonderful, and it's a diverse. The nature work is quite diverse, and to give a very sort of specific idea of what it's like, I think it'd be a good idea to sort of look at the docket of the court, which has been quite busy in the past few years. So that would give you a good idea of what the work's like. So already skill-wise, it helps you really get a good grasp over and good command over the jurisprudence of the court, these issues within these intricate sort of issues within public international law, sort of these fine areas, and it really helps you get a good command over all of this and develop your knowledge and skills in this further. Other than that, since I mentioned it's quite similar to a clerkship, it is a clerkship in a way. It helps you develop those skills as well. So as far as legal research is concerned, both in terms of sheer volume of research that you would deal with or filings, as well as time-wise, it really helps you manage your research better, and definitely helps you hone those skills better. Other than this, what I also left with, I felt that I didn't realize that I would, was that a much better understanding of how the court works practically. So I feel like there's the sort of little gap that's left with when you're studying a subject, as opposed to when you're actually practicing within it or putting it to actual problems. I think it really sort of bridges that gap, and it helps you stay aware of the practical realities to a lot of these disputes. So other than that, I'd also like to mention that during my fellowship, there were several events that were held both within the Paris as well as outside within The Hague, within the international legal community in The Hague itself. So book launches, you have lots of opportunities to talk to professors, lawyers in the profession. So that's really good. Other than that, also I'd like to point out that it's since there are 15 fellows who are selected, and you really have it's a brilliant opportunity in the sense that all of the judges, for example, met with us individually. All of them spoke to us, and so it's really you get to discuss topics and things like that. So it's really a good environment to sort of develop your interest further and hone your knowledge and interest in the field in general. So now I'd like to move to so talking about common myths, or maybe better, I could better frame it as things that might be misunderstood or not known. The first would be that I don't think so that you necessarily have to do your LLM before you do the fellowship program, because I think the requirement is legal studies, but a good sort of knowledge of public international law. So that being said, I do still think it might be difficult to demonstrate sort of that level of understanding and interest in public international law just with your bachelor's, but I'm sure it is, I'm quite sure it's possible, but just to sort of keep that in mind, I think doing an LLM would help you develop that better and to be able to demonstrate that interest better, because I think it will give you more opportunities to be able to specialize in it than only through your bachelor's, I think. But that being said, I don't think it's a formal requirement. Second is that you can apply for the fellowship more than once. There's no restriction. It's not, you're not barred for reapplying in case you were unsuccessful. Your university has to nominate you, so I think it's perfectly possible to apply more than once. I know people who have done that, and especially, for example, if you're at different stages of your education or your career and you feel like you're better placed to apply apply for it at a certain point, of course, I think I would wholeheartedly encourage that to apply for it then. Even if you're not successful the first time, for example, I would encourage applying for it again at a different stage, because it's a really good opportunity if you can pursue it. And the third, and I think the most important thing to clarify really is, and I myself was under this misunderstanding, I want to say, initially, which was that there isn't a fixed list of universities who are authorized to nominate students for this. So I was under the impression, for example, when I started out, or while I was doing when I had finished doing my bachelor's, that there were only certain universities that could nominate individuals for this, and that's not true. Any university can nominate you. So wherever you are, I mean, talk to your university about it, even if your university never has nominated someone before. Of course, the requirements for this is that the university pays you, because the court doesn't. So, and they have to provide proof to the court that they will fund your stay in The Hague. So that's one thing, but there's also now a fund that's being set up so that to encourage universities that perhaps are not able to provide their students with the funds to participate in this program, to increase diversity in it. So there's more opportunities now, I would say. So really, it doesn't matter what university you're at. You don't have to. So, for example, you don't have to be doing your LLM or PhD at a foreign university. I know for a fact that there's been at least one Indian university that has nominated a fellow for the program. So, I mean, it's definitely possible, and I would talk to the university, talk to my professors about it, and really sort of try and pursue that. So I'm now coming towards the end of this, my introduction to this, or my talk on this, is some tips that I would like to share in case you're interested to apply for this. Of course, talk to people, reach out to people who've done the program before. There's a list on the official website of the court with our names on it. Reach out to people. I'm sure there are a lot of us who are willing to talk about our experience applying for the process. For example, try and reach out to people from your university who have done it. For example, that might be quite useful. If you don't have someone from your university who's done it before, talk to your professors about it. Let them know you're interested in the program. Talk to as many people as you can, because I genuinely think it's quite important and it's quite helpful, because that's also what I did when I found out. And for example, I was told that you could demonstrate your interest in public international law, for example, if you have sort of publications in it or good grades in it and things like that. So all of these things are kept in mind, and I think it's really helpful to get as much advice and help in this area as possible. Language skills, I would suggest, for example, because this is in English right now, so I would suggest, for example, French. Make sure that your French is good. If you're bilingual, I definitely think it would increase your odds of being selected. It would also make your fellowship, should you do it, much more fruitful, I think, since, as I mentioned, the court is bilingual, and I think you'd be able to get more out of it if you have a strong grasp on both languages. I think it would be it would feel more successful and more fruitful if that were the case. Find ways to express your interest in the field. So publish, write, take part in clinics, legal clinics, internships, see if you can have if you have access to any research assistant positions. All of this, I think, really helps. I think prior working experience with judges as well is often looked at positively. I think at least this is what I was told as well. What I find really helpful, finally, is and I try and do that even now, but I try to do that then, is think about, just take some time to think about why you want to do it. Think about why and how you could perhaps even contribute to the work of the court. Why do you want to do the fellowship? Why do you think you would be good at it? And I think most importantly, also think about and keep an eye on how would this fit into sort of the broader career path that you intend to sort of work on. How does it fall in line with that? I think sort of keeping a view on this and keeping an eye on this and thinking about this and being able to express this, I think this would help you in the application process as well, because I found it quite helpful to just sort of slow down and think about it a little bit. So that's all. If you have any individual questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Like I said, try and talk to people who've done the program before, because I think that would be quite helpful. It might be easier also to provide more specific sort of advice or share specific pieces of advice or answer questions like that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kritika. I think with that, I'm now going to proceed to the Q&A session. So I think the first question that I have for today is, and I think this is something you already mentioned in your session, is with respect to the CV itself. So let's say for a student who is, let's say, doing his undergraduation in law in India and then doing his master's outside, what are some of the things that you think that student should make sure that they check box during their undergraduation in terms of, let's say, moot court competitions or any other kind of experience that you think that they should definitely check box on their CV during their undergrad, so that in the 6 months or in the first 6 months, once they get into their LLM, they actually have a higher chance of getting into this particular fellowship?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, so I think make sure you sort of focus on public international law as a subject, because I don't know, I think depending on the university, you would have done it at different stages of your bachelor's. I think it would help if you sort of, if it's through papers that you write during, while you're studying it as a subject, public international law. I think that would already be helpful. Make sure you have a good grasp of the subject as a starting point, because that's really something that's essential, and it'll help you further also explore how you can make the best of your LLM as well. Other than that, so on the CV specifically, I think what would help is moot court is practical experience. I think I personally learned a lot from the moot court that I had mentioned earlier. I had done others as well. But I think what's also important is that if you can have publications, if you can already start, if you know you have an interest in it, I would suggest write, try and publish. I would pick also a relevant subject for my dissertation, and I try and publish it if possible. I think publications would look really would help you on your CV, both for getting into the LLM, I think, but also for for the fellowship. I think also, for example, if you have legal aid clinics, practical experience, if you can get any sort of research assistant positions with a professor, for example, or any sort of extracurricular work with international law, I think that would help. So again, going back to the moot court, if it's a moot court in international law, I think it would really help. So if you have JESUP, for example, things like that, I think all of these things really help. So I would try and work on that. But if you can publish, I think that would be really excellent. I think it would be generally helpful in your career path, irrespective. But I think that would help. So basically, on your CV, try and demonstrate your interest in public international law. So yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. That definitely answers that question. And I think my next question is more specifically with respect to the final round of getting selected into the fellowship. And you mentioned that there was a requirement for a motivation letter. Could you elaborate a little bit about this motivation letter and just some general tips for this?
Yes, so this is always because I think everyone has different ways that they look at writing a letter of motivation. For mine, I think so. What I mentioned towards the end of the session was about thinking about why you want to do this. I would suggest being as succinct as possible in your letter of motivation. Keep it short, keep it sort of to the point, and try and express these particular points. For example, why do you want to do this? How would you contribute to the court? How does this fall in line with your career path, as well as what you've done so far that demonstrates this interest in public international law and in the work of the court. So for example, just to give a sort of random example, if you've done your thesis in something related to the court's jurisprudence, highlight that, use that. One other thing than just these points would be that I would try and share my letter of motivation with whoever I could. So for example, I tried to get a lot of feedback from it. I asked some of my professors if they were willing, since they had to send it forward, they gave some advice on it. So that's really helpful. Try and ask your professors, try and ask if you can reach out to people who've done it before, for example, via LinkedIn and things like that. Try and get advice on your letter of motivation. Try and get different people to read it to see whether it sort of sends that message out clearly. So that's what I would do, and be clear about why do you want to do it, and what would you bring, and demonstrate your sort of how you're good for the position, basically.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, Kritika. And I think my last question for today's Q&A session, and I think this is something you spoke about briefly before, after you complete this fellowship, in terms of, let's say, further career opportunities in terms of IL, could you just elaborate a little bit more about what are the new things that open up that are only available to you after completing this fellowship that, let's say, a student who would not have done this fellowship would not really be in a position to pursue?
Yeah, so that's yeah. I think it would definitely help. For example, if you're interested in working at an international court or tribunal. So if you're interested in working at the ICJ itself, for example, as a P2, as an associate legal officer, you already know what the work is like. So I think it would definitely help you if you're applying for that position later on. If you're applying for similar positions, for example, other positions for assistant or associate legal officers at other international criminal courts and tribunals, such as the other ones in The Hague, whether it's the ICC or the ICTY, I think this would really help you. Especially, for example, if it's work in chambers, because you know what the work is like and you're better equipped for it. I think it also really helps you if you are looking for a career in academia. In public international law particularly, I think it really opens that door up. For a PhD, I found it very useful. I thought it was it sort of made the transition that much easier. And just to give examples of the kind of avenues that you have open, and the kind of things that a lot of judicial fellows have done later. So for example, I'm doing my PhD right now after I did the fellowship program, and there are others who are also doing that, but there are a lot of others who are working in law firms on cases in international law. So they're actively practicing all over the world, law firms all over the world. A lot of them are working at other international courts and tribunals. A lot of them are also working for the UN. So I think already, so it kind of allows you to sort of look into how it is like working for the UN. I think it really helps you if you're looking for similar legal officer positions, or I think that really it opens up that area for you. Yeah.
All right. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot for that, Kritika. And I think with that, I come to the end of today's session. I would just like to take this opportunity, Kritika, to thank you on behalf of Team Plant for taking the time out for this wonderful session and that wonderful presentation. I'm sure this is going to be very, very useful for future applicants. So thanks again for joining us for tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.